Hello everyone, Adam Steele here from Hot Pole Studios, and today I'm going to be doing a Mix Engineer Reacts video, as I'm doing twice a week every week now. And last time was something a lot less angry than we've been listening to. We had the Smiths and then we had Kate Bush, and someone said, oh, not just metal, yay, time for metal. Today is Walk by Pantera. One of our mods, Marty, asked me to do a more recent Pantera song, and as cool as that song was, this album, Vulgar Display of Power, has exactly all the elements that I can use to describe a mix of a Pantera song really well. So I'm doing this one today, and I may well go back to something from the album Far Beyond Driven later on, but this is a much clearer example of how a Pantera mix is in my humble opinion. So let's listen from the beginning and we'll start hearing interesting things. Now I'm using Brainworks' BX Control in Reaper so I can hear the mid sides, solo the left and right really quickly. I've got Ozone by Isotope, which I'm not using unless we scoop for a frequency to see if we can pick something out. And then I've got Waves WLM Plus if we want to talk about loudness at any point. So let's begin with the super aggressive guitar. So immediately I can hear things. This is two guitars hard panned, which if I hit mono, you'll see it kind of drops out a bit. And solo, the sides, there's a lot more warmth on the sides. And I can hear things straight away that this guitar sound is really weird compared to anything else that we hear in modern day. So there's a lot of high end, but it's not just the amp with the treble cranked. It sounds like I've heard stories that Dimebag Darrell from Pantera would use a Shure SM58, and I wonder if he was using a cab with a metal grill, because between those, that would provide a lot of the what I think is phasing, combing that cancels out some frequencies and boosts others, which gives us this slightly hollow kind of tone on each side, which is then double tracked to give us the size. And we can hear how there are stops in between. I think he's using a gate pedal, but maybe something like an ISP decimator or something like that, because in my experience, something like a Boss NS2 would either not be fast enough to gate in between those little bits, or you would hear things like high-end hissing, so it would go duch, da-din, duch, da-din, duch. It's usually very subtle, and live you don't tend to pick it out, but on recording when we can get hyperclinical, that's what I would hear. And it also helps that Dimebag was an incredibly tight player. So let's move on from there to the bass and toms build up, and you'll hear the bass comes in. It doesn't really increase in volume as it goes. It just seems to increase in ferocity. That's definitely been well compressed. So the first few hits of the bass there, we do feel it hit the kind of rise in volume. It kind of goes da 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 da, and then stays in a level, but like I said, the ferocity gets bigger. And then we get into the snappy snare, the crash, and into the main riff. I do wonder if those gaps in between on the guitar were actually muted manually by whoever was riding the mixing desk, because usually with a heavy tone like that, when you stop a guitar, you get a da-wo, da-da-da-wo. You get a little bit of low end as the hand comes in to stop the strings. The amount of harmonics on what the guitar is doing changes, which is why if you hear a lot of guys live, when they go chug, 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 it kind of goes jaw, 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 jaw. It's really subtle and it's really short, but it's an organic feel that isn't here. So either it's a really tight gate pedal, or someone on the desk, I think it was Terry Date, has a mute button and is going dead. And if that's the case, I don't think he's doing it on the bass group. I think he's only doing it on the guitars, because I can hear a little bit of a trail off on what I think is the bass. And the reason I say I think it's the bass is it doesn't have that bloom that a high gain guitar would have. It's just a little bit of dum dun dun no dun dun no. Another thing I can talk about here is this is a classic metal mix in terms of the stereo field. If I solo the sides here, we should hear nothing but guitar pretty much, and maybe a little bit of reverb. And then some for the crash, whereas if we do mono, we get less guitar and we get all the bass, all the kick, all the drums. And it's only when we get to this open guitar part section that we hear a separate microphone, maybe on the China or whatever the far crash is. So I wonder if the main overheads for the drums were overhead as like an XY pair or something, which isn't the most stereo separated sound, and then maybe there were spot mics on the far sides to bring in appropriate points. Because like I said, we monoed that and we could hear that the drums were really not super wide until that little section. Okay, so now we've got to where the vocals are with Phil Anselmo, and again, if I solo the sides, he should just disappear apart from maybe a little reverb. So you can hear on there a little bit of some sort of plate reverb or something, which is interesting that it's a really aggressive vocal, but still there is reverb there. It feels dry in the mix until you start soloing things and you go, hang on, no, there is a reverb there. I'm easily bothered by persistence. One step from lashing out at you. You want to get under my skin and call yourself a friend. I've got more friends like you. What do I do? Also, you can really hear how the compression on the vocal, and there's no low end either on the vocal up until I'm guessing around 200 hertz. Let's just play that back a little bit. They really help it to just stay right in the center, right in the middle. Yeah, down there's just no vocal there. There we go. So suddenly the vocal opens up into something that sounds bigger, and it's a doubled vocal, which is off to the side and is an octave lower. And then we've got gang vocals, which are, again, I think that's just several tracks of Phil Anselmo, but really drenched in plate reverb. We can hear that on the sides. Goes on forever. that was an interesting feature. There's kind of a reverse tape thing which has been flown in. You can hear there's a little bit of a rise and then it goes, so I wonder if they had kind of like a rack unit with a reverse delay setting that they kind of fed some pre-vocal into and rode it in. It's entirely possible they did it the old school way of flipping the tape over and recording a forward delay and then reversing it back again, but that does sound a little bit too kind of spiky, that it sounds like it might have been one of the early maybe lexicon units that could do a reverse reverb, reverse delay thing. That's reverse delay as an effect that isn't the traditional tape way, or actually reversing things in a DAW isn't actually reverse delay. It just kind of takes a sample and then plays it backwards. So it gives kind of an illusion of reverse delay, but it's not a true reverse delay. It just sounds like it, which is what kind of caught my ear there. Also, let's now talk about the snare. I wonder if this snare has a sample trigger, which was quite common by this time. This is 91, 92. And a lot of albums by bands like Megadeth have been using samples. I know that Countdown to Extinction, which came out in 91, had a very strong snare sample on that. What they would have to do is once the once the drum performance was done, they would then have to go back, run that through a sample trigger device, which would have a massive delay on it, and then find a way to work out the delay between the tape machine and the trigger and fly that back onto the main tape exactly in time. So no small task. I wonder whether it's triggered or not, because on things like this section here, the snare is a bit too consistent. Although it is definitely a blend, because I can hear on some of the fills, the dig, I can hear that the snare is less strong, but it still has that fundamental that's a little bit too clean. So the toms are definitely not sampled. I can almost hear the bleed on them when they come in. They are quite heavily gated. So on that fill there, I could hear the top tom is slightly off to the left, the other one's centered. Yeah, that last fill where I can really hear inconsistencies in the dynamics, that gives it away that it's a clean. But on some of the other sections, the bleed on the kit is definitely managed in interesting ways. Like, I don't think that if the snare has a sample, that's one thing, but it doesn't have a gate on it, and I can tell that because the hi-hat sounds like it's coming right down the middle, and the hi-hat's coming down the middle because it's partly spilling through the snare mics, which is very common on metal kits. So yeah, the crashes sound like they're more panned than the hi-hats. And when the ride was in earlier with the bell, that definitely sounded like it was almost slightly to the right, which if it was bleeding quite a lot onto the snare mic, as well as having its own panned microphone, the two would add together to give the illusion that it's not as far panned as it is on the separate mic.
Walk, what did you say? Respect. Walk, are you talking to me? Are you talking to me? No way, punk.
Now here we come to the solo section. Now here we come to the solo section, and it's done in a very Van Halen kind of way. The first Van Halen album was done in this way, where one side would be the clean close mic guitar and the other side would basically just be the reverb. If I solo the right hand side, we'll just get the clean guitar. Now if I just solo the left side, we'll get just reverb. This is also a really good place if I just solo the left, so it takes out a lot of the harshness of the clean guitar. We can hear a lot of Rex Brown's bass tone. I mean, the low end is solid. But also what makes Rex Brown's tone interesting is this grind in the low mids. There we go. Can you hear him behind the guitar? And straight back to the solo guitars only. But yeah, you could really hear there how Rex Brown's bass tone had the high end in there, which really helps it to cut in its own place. I mean, because the guitar has quite a lot at, let's see what the frequencies are, but 3K. Yeah, 3.3K. That guitar is just dominating, but the bass sits comfortably in the 1K region. And so because they're in their own spaces, we can hear them both clearly.
Walk, what did you say? Respect. Walk, are you talking to me? Are you talking to me? Walk on home, boy.
There we go, and even more guitar to finish the song. And you can just hear extra reverse guitar layers at the end. And interestingly, as it fades out, I can hear on some of those snare fills where it sounds like there's a lot less low end in the snare. I wonder if it's not caught the triggering properly, if there is a sample, which would make sense that the sample's mainly reinforcing the low end and the snap. Because by all accounts, Vinnie Paul would have his snare, which was a 14x8, so a big snare, very high tuned, to give it a real cut, which made it sound impressive. And it was a hell of a snare drum as well. Like the Paramore Misery Business snare is a Vinnie Paul from Pantera snare. Dan Corneff says so, and so does David Bendeth. So it's that, but tuned slightly differently to this. But it's interesting what you can do with the right tools. And so, yeah, Thank you everybody for watching. If there's anything that you disagreed with, let me know in the comments, because this is just me reacting to my first impressions based on what I'm hearing. I've had a few people on some of these videos going, oh, well, this isn't right, that's not right. Well, it's not about being right. This is not an encyclopedia. This is me showing you from my experience and reverse engineering a mix to give you some insight into what you might be able to do to recreate something very similar. And it's all in good fun. So I hope you've had fun, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.